storage yard I know for junk vehicles. Yeah, on roads and events.
I call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second to the motion?
We have a motion by Councilmember Henry and a second by Councilmember Sayer. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Community comment for anything not on the agenda? You guys want? Go ahead and introduce yourself. You know the drill.
I'm Alan Hibzinski, 1023 Sunny Ridge Drive. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here to talk about the 2019 road improvement, and I know it's on the agenda so far as okaying a budget for it.
Yep.
Or okaying bids for it.
Would you mind, Alan, if we hit this during the 2019 project so it's in context?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yep. It doesn't deal directly with the bids, but
That's okay.
Yeah, it is related. So
I think it would be good information for the council to have.
You're gonna make me come up here again?
I just want to see
Or you're
you
welcome
again.
to sit there.
Yes, sit right here next to me. Presentation.
I'll go to the better half.
Okay.
Good choice.
Sorry, Alan, for the false alarm. Presentations and reports. We have Senator Jensen who's coming in at 7:45, so we will move ahead to the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion by Councilmember Henry.
I'll toggle through it. I wasn't here for the meeting minutes. A second to the motion for the consent agenda?
We have a second by Councilmember Sayer. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right, moving right along to new business, the strategic plan. Mr. Merrick.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So in your packet tonight is a draft of the city's strategic plan. So it's a representation of the two-day strategic plan and goal-setting session the council and staff had on February 28th and March 1st of this year. It's facilitated by Richard Fersman and Irina Fersman. Am I able to toggle this from here? Oh, great. So you can see the participants, mission statement, etc. So the purpose of tonight's draft is the council experienced the two-day session staff did. This is a memorialization of those discussions, and so if you see something that doesn't fit your memory, or you don't like the way that it looks, or you've spent some time thinking about it and you really want to have a discussion, this is the space to do that. So by draft, it isn't necessarily a proposal, but it's in essence a representation of what was heard. But it's certainly a living document at this point, and we want to get feedback from the council. So one of the key pieces that was discussed was milestones and looking at Carver's history. And so we've often talked just about the 1850s to where we're at now, but really kind of look at where the community has been since 1990, which for some of us seems like just yesterday, but I guess that's a long time ago now already. But in the 1990s, the city was still a very small community, right around that 1,000 population, very small staff. The addition to City Hall went on in 1991. Jumping up into the 2000s, where the new fire station was built, the city's first water treatment facility. At the tail end of the decade, 212 expansion occurred. But even as something that we use, or most people use on a day-to-day basis, is Facebook and Twitter. The city launched its own official Facebook and Twitter sites, and you can see the change in population. But when you look at kind of the next stages of, we're almost through the 2010s, we're getting close to a population of 5,000, but some really hallmark projects: Mills Fleet Farm, Carver Elementary, Carver Station, Carver Crossing, Carver Ridge, Lakeview, the new City Hall, significant amounts of housing development. When you look at a 10-year window in the city's history, I know that's something that our community really looks at and admires, is our ability to preserve our history. When we look back 50 years from now, we're going to, I think, look at this last 10 years and say, man, a lot happened in that 10 years. But looking ahead, when you see that a population, 2020 and beyond, anticipated population of 10,000 in 2030, which is essentially double where we're sitting today, looking at the expansion of Jonathan Carver Parkway, 212 to Cologne, new water treatment residents, and probably some things that we're not even contemplating today. It really set the stage for the strategic plan discussion and goal setting for the council and staff as far as what we should be thinking about, what are some initiatives that we can start today that'll help future generations of Carver residents going forward. So with any strategic plan and goal setting, the group worked to identify challenges, and so these are some of the main ones that were identified. One being inconsistent activity in the downtown may limit investment and involvement, and that really was a sentiment toward, even though it's a benefit, the occasional sales. We have stores that have what I call non-traditional hours. It's not a simple, 8 to 4:30 or a 9 to 5. And so at times we might have folks that come to downtown looking to have a retail experience, and there may be a few of the stores that they wanted to visit aren't open, and so we identified that as a challenge. Having a unified identity, so anytime you introduce a whole segment of population, where you go from 1,000 to 3,000 to 5,000 to 10,000, that's going to add some constraints and challenges to how people view the community or the community they want to be in. And so looking at that and how that might challenge buy-in on projects and affect community pride, the cost and timing of infrastructure. So the people that are here now, the discussions that the council even had tonight on equipment, future conversations on water treatment, cost for transportation, they're going to be expensive, and there will be a delicate timing of when those occur and when development and tax base can support that. But that can also lead to strained relationships as far as where the city's taxes compare to other communities, where rates compare to other communities, which gets into limited sources of revenue and the ability to accomplish our goals. And I'll skip over the middle one because it lends itself to the too many number one priorities. We're, as a community, at least the group identified in a position where it's not need versus want, it's need versus need. And so identifying how these needs fit with one another. You obviously can't do them all in 1 year or over 2 years, but how can that strategically be done? And then finishing up with that middle light blue bubble, decision making can be impacted without mutual expectations on communication, meaning sometimes the issue isn't really the issue, it's how it was communicated. And so what can the city do? How can we develop relationships so that when a housing development comes in or an industrial development or some type of policy is discussed, we're not talking about how it was communicated, but what we can do to resolve the problem. And so working with our partners, working with our residents, stakeholders, and how we can develop mutual expectations for how information is shared and when it is shared. And then getting into our strategic direction. So there are some main, what I'll call planks within the strategic plan. One of them is creating opportunities within the downtown. Looking at our current status, which involves the limited geographic area of the downtown, the floodplain. It's also the home to city government, our gathering place, and historically significant. The plan priorities are to search for funding partners to certify the levy and identify redevelopment opportunities. The success indicators, so what does success look like? new city hall, certified levy, business growth, and diversification of businesses. Another plank, fund infrastructure. So looking at our long-term financial plan, kind of dealing with our reputation for high taxes and rates, looking at our established partnerships and collaborations, understanding that 80% of the city's revenue comes from property taxes. And so if you're looking at our current status, one of the plan priorities is a user-friendly financial reporting. And so in order to have great conversations and develop relationships on the financial piece, everyone has to be kind of working from the same playbook, so to speak. And so giving somebody a document, not just the council and staff, for the council and staff to understand, but for residents or a visitor to say, what are they really dealing with from a financial perspective in Carver? How can we all use the same language? And then have discussions, whether we agree or agree to disagree. I think it'll put everybody kind of on an even ground as far as talking about financials. Second piece is include technology in the long-term plan. So not just talking about, the payloaders and the streets, but how can we use and plan for technology? Study franchise fees. The majority of the city's neighbors, and frankly, cities around the state use franchise fees as a revenue source. Is that something that the city should be looking in? And then prioritizing infrastructure, getting to that needs versus needs. There are a lot of priorities, but how can we, if you have all number one priorities, nothing's a priority. And so having tough conversations about how to do that. And so the success indicators, an inventory and priority for infrastructure, diversification of revenue, and council clarity on the impacts of new infrastructure. So it's one thing to identify the need. This road needs to be reconstructed. We need a water treatment plant. But what are the impacts to that on a financial perspective before the council's making decisions, and that's communicated to residents. The third plank is fostering community, an undefined identity, no dedicated communications personnel, and limited website functionality were noted as our current status. Plan priorities were listed as explore concepts for communication support. So that could be not just hiring somebody, but looking to partner or have a collaboration with another city that has existing support. Identify website vendors. One of the things that was noted is our website might be a little antiquated for today's needs as far as website services go. And then one of the pieces that was identified in the city's last strategic plan is to do a community survey. So instead of maybe guessing or assuming what we feel like residents and businesses and property owners are looking for, develop a communications tool or survey to get some more data to support where we're going, or data to support maybe moving in a different direction. Success indicators being upgraded communications, dynamic communications with residents, a multifunctional website, variety of services, and Carver is on the map. And that really relates to I think an ongoing narrative that the city, if you're not kind of from the area, you don't know where Carver is. If you tell somebody that you're from Carver, they say Carver County. The first step is getting my mom and dad to realize that there's a difference between the two. So I'll get on that right away.
Thank you.
And then the last plank is refining Carver's identity. Again, talking about that old and new dynamic, and this will kind of go up and down, but as pieces go, you're at a point where you probably have more residents that have lived in the community for less than 10 years and more than 10 years. At some point, that'll go up and down, but that's a really interesting dynamic, and to recognize that and understand how that fits into identifying goals and tailoring messaging to people. Excuse me, inconsistent amenities and lack of a unifying message. The plan priorities were to add additional historic kiosks that are traditionally found in the downtown, custom trademarks and messages for the city, signs that identify a really key amenity in the city, but also in the region is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Trails, creating a steering committee to identify JCP improvements. So Jonathan Carver Parkway, one function will be the transportation, but it was noted within the goal-setting retreat that Jonathan Carver Parkway is going to really serve as another main street, if you will, to Broadway in the downtown. And so how can we make those two roads feel and look the same and not have two distinct areas, but make them more congruent with one another. And then review costs for uniform street signs, and then have in conjunction with the JCP improvements, how can we have consistent amenities through the community? So street lights, signage, et cetera, so that even though each of them are their own thing, how can you make sure that you know that when you're in Carver, in the downtown, or up by Fleet Farm, you're still in the city of Carver? And so that gets into the success indicators, which is city continuity, and then that gateway feel to the Jonathan Carver Parkway corridor, that when you're on that road, you know you're in the city of Carver. So what does that look and feel like? So ultimately, this all gets down to the action plan. How are we going to do it? Who's going to be in charge? How are we going to communicate it? So this is the draft action plan. This was put together at during the session, but kind of put it in a table form. So our goal would be to communicate our progress to the council on a quarterly basis during your regular meeting, and give the council an opportunity to provide feedback and ask questions related to how we're hitting certain targets. So I've kind of run through all the pieces within this. We're happy to take comments on tweaks, changes, additions, deletions that you'd like to see, and then we'd bring it back to your next meeting for adoption. Thank you.
Comments?
I don't have any.
Glenn?
Well, it was a fun 2 days,
Well, that's good.
and Brent, you did a great job putting this together as usual. We just need to implement it and start moving forward. That's all I got.
Lori?
Just from a project management perspective, this summer 2020 looks really heavy for a lot of target dates. So I don't know if it makes sense to move some things sooner, move some things later, just to kind of balance it out. But I do also appreciate and look forward to getting the quarterly updates.
It gives them a year and a half to get it done.
But I think that's a really good question. So some of the timing relates to, whether or not the council's going to want to invest in some of these pieces. So some of that timing is related to that. So if you look at signs for, the downtown, depending upon the scope and kind of character of how you want those signs to be, you may decide not to do that. And so, some of these pieces, like also the community survey, depending upon how scientific the city wants to get into that and the resources you want to extend, that might not happen to a later date. So one of the things that we're going to commit to is providing some resources so you have an understanding of what a community survey looks like and the costs prior to getting into the 2020 budget cycle. But if we, I think as a group and as a community do this right, these target dates are going to move up and down based on kind of real-time conditions, if you will. And so I appreciate the sentiment that we don't want to have everything in there, but part of it is I think we're going to start here, and then based on where we land on some things, we're going to come back and say, okay, we're going to move this to 2023 and move this up to fall of 2019, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
I too agree with Glenn that it was a great process and how we came here. The irony of too many number one priorities and coming up with 15, for the most part, maybe at least solid half of them are brand new number one priorities is not lost on me. That said, I think we all put the work into it last month, now into this. So as long as we feel strongly that this is something, and with the understanding, kind of like what Brent just went through, that these are moving targets and not written in stone and something that will be flexible. Brent, with the strategic plan that we created 2 years ago, did a really good job of always checking in and kind of providing the updates that he said he would. So I am happy to move ahead with this.
Agreed.
So, well done.
So if you don't have any changes, you'd be free to just adopt it tonight. So I was assuming that you'd have some changes to make, but if you don't, you can just adopt it.
Sure. Do you need a motion for that then? Okay.
I'll make motion to adopt Carver strategic plan, the action plan, as it is laid out.
I'll
Motion
second
from-
that.
Motion from Councilmember Henry and a second from Councilmember McKnight. Or any additional comment, discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, moving on now to the 2019 Street Improvement Project. Mr. Lanas.
All right, thank you. I'm here to talk to you about a project you've heard about a couple of times before, so this is going to be a fairly short one. There you go. So I'm just going to start it off with just a refresher of the job here. We'll refer back here as necessary, but the big one is this is the last remaining step in a pretty substantial process to date. You can see what's been accomplished to date on the 2019 streets project. Here we've gone through many steps in the 429 process. This is the final major step before construction activities here. We did receive the bids here recently, and tonight would be the award. So what we're looking at is your motion to award the project based on bids received on the 7th at 10 a.m. So we received 7 bids. We got very good numbers on the project. William Mueller and Sons was the low bidder. It was well below the engineer's estimate. Our estimate was close to the high bid, and this one, the biggest risk for us is if the bids come in well above our estimate and the assessments fall below the 20% threshold. That's a bit of an issue. So we tend to try and favor the high side of these 429 processes. So it is low versus the estimate, not outside the realms of normal. Based on the bid checks and reviews, what we would conclude is we just got really good numbers with very competitive bids. So it's a little bit lower than we were expecting, but I would say generally speaking, from our perspective, that's going to be good news. So ultimately, what we would be doing tonight is recommending award of the contract to William Mueller and Sons, with the next major step being construction activities, and that would start in May, based on what we're hearing from the contractor, probably middle of May. So, any questions at this point on the bids or information?
Why don't we, before we open it up to questions, Alan, why don't we hear from you? Sorry. You'll get it back. You'll get your group back.
Yeah, just give me a few minutes
Sorry.
to get into it. Again, my name's Alan Obzinski, 1023 Sunny Ridge. We've gone to all the meetings so far, with the exception of the open house and the final council meeting when we were out of town on winter vacation. I did read the results of, well, let me take a step back. I think it was a December meeting. Specifically, we're talking about Sunny Ridge Drive. The proposal was made to widen it from 22 feet to 29 feet, and I guess at that point in time, I questioned it and raised the question of why do we need to widen it. But when I did read the final plans, when we were back from vacation, I did see that it was 29 feet in there, so I did contact Brent. He referred me to Josh with Bolton Mink, and anyway, I was kind of shockingly surprised by the answer that I got back from Josh, and I'm going to read a little bit of it. The existing road is approximately 22.5 feet wide. The new street will be centered on the existing road from 6th Street, that's the intersection down across from the hockey rink, to 1027 Sunny Ridge Drive, which is the house just to the west of us. The new street is widened to the south due to the hill on the other side for the last 5 houses. So in other words, across the street there'd be no yard taken. We would be losing 7 feet of front yard. Our house and most of the houses in that neighborhood were actually built in the late 70s through the mid 80s. Maybe there's 2 or 3 that were built after that, and they were all positioned at where the current road is now and the current road width. So, you know, losing 7 feet of front yard, our setback is not, I mean, it's going to be reduced by quite a bit, a pretty good percentage. So I would just ask, I had Josh come out and we did a walkthrough. Of course, this was the end of February and the snow was about this high on the side of the road, so we really couldn't get a good view of what, you know, what could be done. But I would just ask that maybe someone could come out and take another look. Do we actually have to go 29 feet? I know that was something that was the fire marshal or something like that had recommended it, but I know in reading the Minnesota statutes on resurfacing that a road can be 22 feet wide or grandfathered in. So I guess I'd just like to see if somebody could come out and we'll take a look at both sides and maybe we can go 26 feet with what's available on both sides or something in that neighborhood. Is that something that would be possible or doable? I don't want it to, you know, to mess up the bid or whatever, because I think you've got that finalized. I just like to throw in, if we stuck with 22 feet, we would be saving 8% in blacktop.
Well, thank you for the comments here. I guess at this point, I'd say we would never turn away a resident's request to walk the site, try and take a look at things, what can be done. And probably in this case further explain the circumstances. So I would say yes, we'd be happy to visit with you. As far as what would you like?
Oh, I was going to say Josh did point out, you know, there's a hillside on the other side, and they would have to do some retaining wall building and stuff like that. So it was less expensive. I realize the city does own the right of way, and you know, can do whatever they want with X amount of our front yard, but I just think in fairness, it would be nice to have it split between both sides of the street. There's 5 houses that are affected that would lose, and that's almost half of the neighborhood, would lose the 7 feet out of their front yard. There's one house especially that's much closer than the others, so they'd be you know, in spitting distance of the road, I guess, from their front window. Pardon the expression.
Sure. Well, I guess to answer the first question, yes, we certainly can go walk it and take a look at the specific comments. Again, the gist of it is, just for your understanding, sometimes, you know, things don't always work out the way you'd ideally, you know, like to do things. We would normally, you know, look at splitting things. That's probably most typical, but in this case, there's a lot of limitations on the north side. There's some very notable walls, and it's not just the wall; it's what's behind the wall. You get into some very substantial impacts and issues. So sometimes we're constrained, and I would call this a constrained situation. I mean, we're working within the right of way, and so I think the resident understands the rights exist to reconstruct it as necessary. In this case, there's substantial costs on the north side, so that's why the south side was chosen. So the constraints being what they are, it's going to favor the south side without notable cost increases. So I think that's the rationale. And then, you know, past that here, it's the street width issue, which has been pretty heavily vetted as to why it would be widened to this point as a matter of standard practice and as a matter of minimal widths associated with parking on one side. So yeah, those are the explanations as to why we are where we are. Understanding that there's going to be some concerns and comments. I mean, we're happy to visit on those further, but I find it unlikely that we would get to any type of a situation where we'd be notably modifying the curb closer to those walls without quite a bit of impact to what we're talking about tonight as far as an award or notable changes. So.
And so far as the width goes, I know you said it's been vetted many times, but is there any way we could take a look at each side of the street and say, okay, the north side, there is a slope, there are retaining walls, but we can move it 2 feet here? Something along those lines.
Yeah, I would say at this point there's a process that's been followed to get to where we are today. The council is hearing an award recommendation at this point, and I mean that's to award the contract as it's bid. I would not be changing a recommendation to award based on as it's bid at this point. I would only entertain that we'd be happy to visit with you further on the topic in the field. And,
Okay.
And
But
review.
you're saying you probably won't change.
I'm saying it's unlikely to change based on the limitations we have at this point, based on the process that's been followed to date.
Okay.
But at this point here, we again are dealing with a recommendation to award the entire contract, and I would not suggest moving otherwise based on this comment. The constraints are pretty fixed at this point.
Okay. You know, based on if it is cast in stone, or I guess in this case cast in asphalt, so far as assessments go, since we would be sacrificing most of our, or just about, well, we'd be sacrificing all of the widening, and my contention is it would actually lower the property value by putting the house closer to the road. And I believe assessments are based on property value being increased. Would it be the situation where we wouldn't be assessed, or we would be assessed lower?
Yeah, so the city does a special benefit analysis, so it doesn't, the assessment or the special benefit doesn't contemplate how much work is, how close it is to the edge of the right-of-way. So and the city attorney can jump in here if he's hearing anything that I'm saying that's incorrect, but I'm not aware of any conditions where if a improvement is made within a certain section of the right-of-way that have an adverse impact to a property. But Larry, do you want to jump in on that?
It's largely an issue of appraisal and benefit to property. The city has done what it has customarily done on these difficult infill rebuild projects. We have a special benefits analysis done, and that analysis does not indicate any delta or difference from one side of the street to the other.
Okay, so specifically what you're saying is we lose 7 feet of front yard, and the people directly across the street lose nothing, but yet it's not a negative impact on us.
I would say that there's not an adverse impact that I'm aware of within the special benefit report. It doesn't it contemplates the right-of-way as the city's right-of-way. It doesn't.
Right.
I understand and I very much appreciate the sentiment that it's your front yard, but to the point of the right-of-way boundaries, it doesn't contemplate that. I would offer that the special benefit brought that value or brought the assessment down, and I know that might not seem relevant to some based on the amount, but the traditional assessment models had that an engineer would use had the assessments quite a bit higher than what the city is assessing. So I think there's a function within that. but I can't speak to an intricacy like that. I understand the point that you're making, Alan. I think it's a fair one. I do think it's a slippery slope for a
Well,
city
that's
to
across
start.
the street.
Yeah, well said. For if the city would start to establish what percentage of the improvements were done on one half of the right of way versus another, I don't know if that could be replicated or sustainable, and I think that would be kind of wrought with peril. I do understand your point, and I think it's a good point to make. I just don't think it applies in this situation as far as how the city conducts its special assessments.
Okay. And so far as the widening, if we were to go on a walkthrough and say, oh, look, we could take 2 feet on this side.
I think
Could we?
I think the discussion is there to have the thing that I've relied on is the input from the fire department.
Right.
And so this would be considered a maintenance piece. This is a reconstruction, and so in order to preserve parking on one side, it needs to meet this. Frankly, the street isn't as wide as the city would typically put it, but there are some constraints. This isn't as wide as some other of the areas that are being reconstructed. I think Dietrich and Kirchy are at 32, so there was some sensitivity to the issue that you're addressing, and so instead of putting 32, which would have even added more pressure on the condition, the engineer is recommending a 29, so that's 3 feet less than what our standard is. So I hope that you see that, but I do understand and appreciate the concern that you're bringing, because I do.
Yeah, because
I
the
understand that.
Minnesota statutes say that, it can be grandfathered in if it's less than, and as a matter of fact, I'm looking at one now. If the average daily traffic is 1 through 749, the lane width can be as narrow as 10 feet. And the lane width combined with the shoulder can be 11 feet, which would put it at the 22 feet, which is probably what it was done to originally. So I can reference this. It's 8820.9926. It's a Minnesota statute.
I think the guidance that we've been working off of is just kind of the fire department. And if I remember correctly, it wasn't just your street where we reevaluated the widths based on what the fire department said.
Right.
And I see where you're coming from. So Dan, I have a question. I assume that we have snugged the street up as close to the north as is feasible without having to put in retaining walls in that section, right?
That was the intent. I mean, I can't say for 6 inches to a foot. I mean, it was the best intent was to, yes,
Okay.
Hold that north side without wall impacts.
Okay.
I mean, that's one of the things we could offer is if there is additional space without having impacts, we could work with the engineer's office and support moving it to the north. We just don't. That could be nothing, or it could be 6 inches.
Yeah, I think that would be great if we could just, without impacts, and I think, Alan, that's kind of what you're asking for too,
Yeah.
if I heard you correctly. Just take another
Yep.
kind of look at that to see if there's any way we can snug that up a little bit more.
Yeah,
No,
and,
I've-
'Cause
and again, I apologize for coming in so late, but we did miss and I hadn't seen it on the agenda until, boom, all of a sudden the bids
Yep.
had
Happy
been
you
sent
came
out.
in.
Yeah,
So-
so we can certainly commit to that walk and best we can do approach to it. I'm just trying to set expectations,
Yeah.
reasonably at this point. So,
Okay.
and I would say it would not impact necessarily the award recommendation in front of you today.
Yeah, and like I said, you'll get a discount if you could just narrow it.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Alan, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
I guess I just had one question. W. Mueller and Sons, can you speak to any history that the city has had with this vendor? But
I can speak to them in the market. I mean, they're a very capable contractor. We've dealt with them for many years. They've been around for decades. They're paving specialists and road builders, and so I would say yes, they have a lot of experience. I'd have to ask Brent as far as his past experiences with them in the town prior to my time, but in the industry, in the Southwest, they do a lot of work and a lot of reconstructs, and I would say generally speaking, they've been a very good outfit to work with.
Thank you.
The 29-foot width of Sunny Ridge, that's so we have parking, there will be parking on one side of the street, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The way it's laid out, that 7 feet that Alan is talking about, that's gonna impact his yard. What will the setback be for the house on that particular property, do we know?
Well, I'd have to pull up some of the prior figures that we did, but from recollection, I can get back to you on this with a little bit more detail, but from my recollection, the setbacks were well beyond what's average.
The setback remains the same, because the setback is measured
from the
from the
right-of-way.
property line
Oh.
to the home. That's how the setback is measured.
Are you referring to the curb to the home?
Okay,
Is
yes.
that what you're, yeah, because
Yes.
Brent's getting at the setback for the right-of-way is fixed. It is
Right.
what it is. Are you referring to the distance from the curb to the home?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that gonna be comparable to what, will be going on Kirchy Hill? Where we're widening the road there?
We'd have to get out and measure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to do a few checks on that, but when we looked at it, we didn't see anything outside the norm as far as that distance, so.
All right. Explain to me the $149,000. I can't wrap my head around that. I've been looking at it all day.
The mill and overlay, I mean, that was an opportunity to get some pricing for some potentially budgeted rehabilitation for mill and overlay. Sometimes when you have a paving crew out there and a mill and overlay is a possibility, what you'd end up doing is saying, all right, it usually makes some sense to run the paver a little bit further, you get better pricing and such. And so the intent was, all right, if there's some budgeted money, or some potential, I should say, for doing any mill and overlay rehab, here's an opportunity to get it priced. And so what it's set up as right now is this is something that could be deleted in full based on any final budget decisions or determinations on whether or not any additional mill and overlay would proceed from a maintenance perspective in the next year and a half. And so right now that's included as separable item that is subject to deletion, and contractually it can be deleted. So the intent was to get pricing for potential work.
Potential, and the potential for that mill and overlay was from High Street on Kirchy over to 6th Street, and then the remainder of High Street and west of Dietrich and High Street as well?
It's west and somewhat connected as far as the area and roadways, yeah.
Primarily area that wouldn't be covered under the 2019 project, correct? I see Brian nodding.
Yeah, it's related by area, yes.
Okay, so this 149,000 is out of this number already? Or it can be stripped out of that number?
It could be stripped out of that. This is the contract that would be awarded.
Okay, so the contract of,
You'd be awarding for $2,236,000.
okay, and some change. And then the 149 is in the bid as it is right now, correct?
Yeah,
Okay, but that can be stripped out if the work doesn't go on, correct?
yep.
Okay. I'm good.
Can you talk us through the timeline, Dan, please? You said starting in May, substantial completion by,
Well, substantial completion, we'd expect September, October here. I mean, it's going to be pretty well wrapped up. You know, you've have a number of different areas to this project, but we'll talk the big stuff, the sewer and water, Dietrich and Kirchy. We'd expect that to start in later May. Utilities, underground work would be happening in June, July. They'd start to wrap things up, start to get it back up to grade probably August, September. By October, we'd like to see most of the pavement go down, and so we'd generally be setting the tone that will be early fall when we start to see things buttoned up again. But final work would not occur until spring of 2020, obviously, when you want to button things up, do your final touch-ups and everything like that. But a majority of work would be fall.
Okay, I'm just thinking back to what would have been the 2017 project, and we kind of went pretty late into the fall before we saw that paved. So do we have it written anywhere that paving must take place before November 1st, Thanksgiving? Is there anything in the contract that has a firm deadline?
Yeah, we have a substantial completion date in there here. I'm sorry, I'd have to look. We have
Okay.
a couple different interim dates on that, but yes, we do.
Okay, great. And then the only other thing that I wanted to say is I'm thrilled that you guys overestimated this. Really good work. 18.6% below is tremendous. So that's good.
Good.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Consider a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 112-19, awarding a contract to W. Mueller & Sons, Inc., in the amount of $2,236,059.73 for the 2019 Infrastructure Improvements Project.
We have a motion by Councilmember McKnight,
I'll second that.
second by Councilmember Henry. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Let's go back to the legislative report. Senator Jensen. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
So I'll just go ahead with a few brief comments, and then if we could just do Q&A, that'd probably be great.
Great.
Thank you, everybody that's been coming down to the Capitol and letting me know what you're hoping for. And I did check in today with a couple different people in regards to the Carver levy project and moving forward. We definitely want to make certain we use every avenue to help obtain funds. And I think that we talked, Courtney, when you came down, and I think we were looking at, if I remember right, I don't have it in front of me, but I think was it about 9 million?
Yeah, 9.4.
Yeah, and we're gonna go aggressive and do as much as we can. I think that it'll take a little while just to get everything in the hopper, but as long as you folks are bird dogging it, and my office is bird dogging it, and I think Representative Nash is aware of it, and I'm not certain if he's leading as well or if he's sort of waiting for us. I'm not sure in that regard. Otherwise, it's interesting to hear your discussion of roads. This discussion is going on all over, and you end up having to make a lot of challenging decisions. You want to make the best decisions. You know that this is going to be there for a long, long time, and I've been there, done that, and I know the stress and the decision-making challenge that it represents for you. In terms of other things that are going on at the Capitol, I think I've talked with perhaps most of you, if not each of you. It is important for you to watch and make sure that we don't have things coming through the legislature that would make your job more difficult. Every once in a while, a bill will sneak through there. And I remember one, I think a year or two ago, where there was, it seemed like a reasonable bill, but it had to do with a moratorium, an interim ordinance where you would sometimes declare a moratorium on a project, so you could just sort of press pause and say, we want to look at this again. And there was a bill that was going to basically strip away some of your authority to do that. And I think that was one of those bills that it really taught me a lesson, because as I watched it go through, I said, yeah, local control, yada, yada, yada. But actually, I think it was late in the game that we really started to realize what that bill would do, and so that bill was able to be squashed. But if you see anything at all, especially you, Brent, in your position, you'll probably see it quicker. But we see 4,000 or 5,000 bills come across our desk, so we really need your help. Otherwise, I think the city of Carver is one of the cutest darn little cities there is in Minnesota. Driving down into the valley, and I thought, this is just incredible. So I'd be glad to stand for any questions.
Any questions?
I'm sure Brent has one.
Glenn's got one. He's working on one. Well, I'll start. So, Senator Jensen, I appreciate a couple Saturdays ago we met for coffee and we talked about the levy project, which we're going to start. There's the letter that we shared with you that Brent and I wrote that will be in the April newsletter, which is going out with everybody's utility bill, which should be in everybody's mailboxes by this weekend. So that's kind of how we're starting the communication with residents. Senator Jensen sat down and he talked, and I jotted down notes and gave me a to-do list a mile long, which I really appreciate. I'm a list person and being able to check things off. That's exactly the direction I needed. So I appreciate your support and your partnership. You kind of spoke to some of the preemption stuff too. I appreciate that. With that and then the 212 expansion, those are kind of rounding out our 3 top priorities. So thank you.
You're very welcome, and if I could just respond to that. In regards to this levy project, I think we really want to do exactly what you're leading the way on, Courtney. We want to look at it as a campaign, and I'd appreciate it if you just maybe send me a text or an email in about 2-3 weeks, because I'd like to send letters out myself from my office as we move forward, and whatever we can do to get folks from Carver, the city of Carver, to reach out and touch and I'd given Courtney a list. We want to make sure that Dave Osmick on the Transportation Committee and Eric Pratt, and we just want to touch as many bases as we can. And the fact that Carver is knowledgeable and willing to put skin in the game, that really moves these kinds of projects along. The toughest projects are where you start to get close to that $10 million mark, and the entity doesn't want to participate. They just want the money. But when you have the wherewithal to do what you're doing, and you've already paid for some studies and things like that. Courtney gave me a little bit of an overview as to what it would look to the human eye as they drive by. And I'm going to guess that you're going to have to be ready to answer those questions too, as you talk about adjusting your levy. And I think people will say, well, what is it going to look like different compared to what it does today? Because whatever you can do, if it appears that there's going to be any negative on this, we want to just nip that in the bud right now, because what you're proposing is just a very excellent project, and it will serve this area for long past my funeral, that's for sure. So, and then the 212 project, we have the 2 gaps, of course. And the first gap, we're within $5 million of being where we need to be to go forward. So we have gone ahead and continued to pursue that, but we've decided to go straight for the $38 million for the second gap. And several of you were down there when we testified, and Senator Dave Senjum, who always leads the way on the bonding bill, shouldn't say always, but as long as I've been there, and he made it clear that he thinks the 212 project is the marquee project for Minnesota. Frankly, in the last 2 years, it wasn't. It was Highway 14. And Senator Senjum lives down by Highway 14, and so do several other rural senators. But we've gotten that one checked off. So now it's time for 212 to step up and be first in line. So they're working very diligently to make sure that 212 is the one. And I really think that before my term is up, I think 212 will be funded fully, and that's going to be exciting. So if we can get $5-6 million for Carver to do your levies, and we can get 212 done, that'll be, if it's not a home run, it'll at least be a good solid ground rule double. Otherwise, I don't, like I say, I'm always interested in hearing what you have to say. Part of my job is, I think, the big policy issue with healthcare, and that's my deal. That's my wheelhouse. But I certainly want to do as much as I can for my constituent area. So, and it's just wonderful to work with folks like you that are so engaged and so interested in pulling the rope together. You're not making enemies out of anybody. Nobody's talking about your project. Say, "Wow, we didn't really like the way they came across." You're doing everything right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jensen, for coming out to Carver. We enjoy seeing our representatives giving us feedback and updates of what's going on down at the Capitol, because we don't always get it, but I'm glad that the mayor and Brent went down and spent time with you and went over our wants and needs. and kind of laid out just what we're looking for to move Carver forward. I know the levee project has been going on for 20 years, and this is the first time I'm actually can start to see where progress will be made. It's just been pulling teeth with the Corps, but is what it is. I know that U.S. Fish and Wildlife and, of course, the DNR will be happy to work with you. The 212 expansion, I can't emphasize it enough on what it will do to western Minnesota. It's the corridor that has been neglected, but it's to Chaska now, and from here to Norwood Young America, it will be amazing, the growth and activity that will happen along this corridor when that's completed. Thank you for your diligence and working to get the funding.
You're very welcome. And perhaps I just have one piece of advice. I do think, and I am sharing this with most of the city councils in Carver County, some cities are perhaps small enough that it won't be such an issue, but you're not small, you're 5,000 folks. But I do think that you're going to have to bring yourself up to speed on marijuana. I think that that's going to be a big issue. And I think the 3 steps I would recommend is first have a general overview so you start to understand the difference between hemp and a marijuana plant with active THC greater than 0.3%. The second thing I would do is I'd recommend that you bring yourself up to speed on hemp and CBD, because we already have farmers in Carver County that have made it clear that they're going to move forward aggressively raising hemp. And I think that because hemp products have been legalized in the agricultural bill of 2018, it's not going to go away. But if you actually look at the letter of the law, the CBD products that you're starting to see on pharmacy shelves and grocery shelves, by the letter of the law, are actually illegal. And the FDA has just decided that they're not going to move forward. When you put a CBD product on a shelf, you can't tell whether that came from a medical marijuana plant or a hemp plant, because CBD is nothing but a molecule. And basically the way it's determined is whether or not it's less than 0.3% THC or greater than that. And so you're probably going to be faced with the potential for that product showing up in your community. And then lastly, when we get straight down into medical marijuana dispensaries, I met with this morning at 7:30, and a gentleman said, well, we're going to do 2 CBD stores right now. We plan on opening in the next 2 months, and then we'll wait for the law to change, and then we'll move forward on that. And I know Waconia City Council, with the large impact that Ridgeview Medical Center has on it, that the likelihood that medical marijuana dispensaries are going to be interested in being out in this area is very real. So as you look at your zoning and things like that, you're going to want to be prepared in advance. So the 3 steps would be, first, get the overview. Second, get up to speed on CBD and hemp. And then third, ask yourselves the question what you want to do in regards to medical marijuana dispensaries. The issue's not going to go away. 100 years ago, we had prohibition from 1920 to 1933, and 100 years later, we're dealing with opiates and CBD and hemp and medical marijuana, regardless of what happens with recreational marijuana, which I don't think will happen anything in Minnesota very soon. There is a bill in the House to put it on the ballot in 2020, and there are many of us who say that's just exactly the wrong thing to do. We're just not ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jensen, for coming.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your advice. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for letting me interrupt your meeting.
Thank you. No, thanks for your time. We appreciate you stopping by. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Moving on, the Commerce Drive Improvement Project. Mr. Lanas, see you again.
All right, back at it.
Back
I
at
think
it.
you know what I'm going to say here. So I have another round on this one here, Commerce Drive. We're at about the same stage we were before. You can all remember Commerce Drive, the roadway that's going to be serving Lakeview Industries here. It's necessary to get constructed here yet this year to try and serve the new new facilities going in there for Lakeview. So that project was was bid recently at the same time as Lakeview or as 2019 streets. We tried to tie them together just in case there was any interest from the contractor that received the one to go after the other. Sometimes that happens. In this particular case, it did not. Mueller did not show up again, but the issue tonight here is determining whether or not we want to award the project. We got eight bids. This one was just a hair higher than the engineer's estimate. On this one, it was about 3% higher. Sorry about that, but it was right in there. We got close. This one surprised us a little bit on the higher end, but the low bid came from Ryan Contracting. The majority of them were right in there where we'd expected them to be. On almost every single contract bid, you're gonna get a few that are out in left field. Here you'll see the high couple of bids were not in the ballpark. We see that on a regular basis. Somebody interprets things quite differently, but low bids were quite competitive and right in the ballpark where we'd expect them to be. Ryan Contracting, again, is a responsible contractor. They've been around for a long time. They do lots of jobs like this, lots of big projects, and they certainly would be capable of doing the work. So we would be recommending award to Ryan as a responsible contractor with a responsive bid right in the ballpark of where we'd expect it to be. And it falls right in line with the intended project budgets that were set on the job with the deed grant and the TIF financing. It's underneath what we would have programmed for this project, and leaves a bit of contingency in our project budget to proceed. So I guess the request would be award of the contract as bid to Ryan Contracting. Any questions?
What's the timeline on this one for construction?
They're going to try and hit this one pretty hard. The intent is to try and get the majority of the work done here by September. So the timeline was set up to line up with Lakeview Industries. I think we would be ahead of Lakeview Industries at this point. And so we're still going to try and push it along, but it would be largely in place by September.
So the projects will be taking place at the same time.
Currently.
Lakeview is not waiting on this road to go in before they start construction.
No,
Okay.
no, they're not going to be waiting. We're just trying to get it lined up such that as they're getting closer to finish, the road's about ready. So.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned that this was within the budget that we had for the deed grant. What was that budget? Was it $2 million?
Yeah, we'd programmed about $2 million, 50-50 split between the TIF financing and the deed grant.
Okay.
And so it was originally priced out or estimated out such that $2 million would cover it. It does fall in line with that, below that, after all project costs are factored in, plus a contingency, so we feel comfortable that this is where it should be.
Perfect, thanks.
Lori?
I don't have any questions.
All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 112-19, awarding a, pardon me, on the wrong spot. I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 113-19, awarding a contract to Ryan Contracting Company in the amount of $1,418,635.90 for the Lakeview Industries Infrastructure Improvement Project.
We have a motion by Councilmember Sayer,
I'll second.
a second by Councilmember McKnight. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Whoop dirt.
Right. Moving on, furniture acquisition for the City Hall project. Mr. Merrick.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So as a part of the City Hall project, a furniture committee was created and to identify, plan, and communicate office furnishing needs for the new building. So I want to thank Vicky Sanzaiden, Brenda Good, Aaron Smith, and Mark Pistolka for really doing a lot of good work on putting together the plan that you see before you tonight. They initially identified 7 potential vendors, narrowed that list to 4, and then ultimately selected Fluid Interiors as the vendor of choice based on cost considerations. One of the really key points is responsiveness when you're dealing with a project of this type of scope. Getting the available responses in a timely fashion is important. And then some really cool, frankly, technology tools to basically they can change the furnishings in a room before your eyes on a conference call, so they could really play around with some things. So in your packet is a kind of a 3D design of the building and its furnishings. I'm going to focus on the village hall space in the lower level, otherwise known as the multi-purpose room. That was a kind of a major piece of discussion during the kind of the city hall site planning and design process. The design showed a room for 198 people with tables and chairs. The one thing that I wanted to note is that showed a plan for attached pedestal seats. So think of your traditional cafeteria room, a chair without a back. The table folds up, the chairs fold with it. The furniture committee looked at that and didn't feel like that was going to meet the needs of the users for that room. So as you can see on the screen and in your packet, the configuration is a table and chair set up with detached chairs with a full back. We had a chair at the last council meeting of a different color that would have been in the room, but same design. Ultimately, what that does is it changes the seating from 198 to 148. And so that's a departure from what the council had seen in the community in previous designs. And then to the left of the village hall space, that's the main lobby, you can see some seating areas for the public as they come into the space. And then the second floor, just a traditional office layout, cubicle and office spaces. You can see the council chambers in the lower left. As it relates to existing furniture, the cubicle stations that are at the fire station public services building will remain and be used by existing staff. All the office chairs are going to be taken from that are currently in place. They're going to be brought over. Those have been purchased fairly recently throughout time based on need, and so there wasn't really a need to buy a new chair for the sake of buying a new chair. So there's a lot of detail within it. The budget for the furnishings within the city hall project budget was $150,000. The proposal came in at just $481.21 over that, so $150,481.21. The purchasing is through U.S. Communities, which is a collaborative. So in essence, how it works is an entity bids out the project or bids out furnishings for a certain building. Then through a joint powers agreement, that pricing is extended through or extended to other agencies. So it could be a city, county, school district, what have you. And so in this instance, all the furnishings are through or being purchased or acquired through Fluid, but through their U.S. Communities collaborative purchasing. And so that eliminates the need for a city to go out, even though this is under the $175,000 threshold for bidding. It eliminates the need for the city to get multiple quotes. So it really allowed the furniture committee to focus in on one vendor, knowing that the furnishings had previously been bid. So happy to answer any questions that the council has.
Do you by any chance remember, Brent, how many seats we used to have in the previous village hall main common area, or even on the lower level?
I don't. It would be a wild guess at this point.
Do you think it's more or less than 148?
More.
More?
Yep, quite a bit more, I would say.
Okay.
I don't know. Brian, do you have I'd guess, but I don't want to be shamed tomorrow by someone who had a better answer. So
Okay. Fair enough.
I would say it's easily over 200.
Okay, over 200. That's perfectly good for me. I just wanted to get a sense of perspective. I know it's physically a little bit of smaller space, but
there's two kind of caveats. So one, I think at one point they could get to, close to 300 down in that lower level. The one thing that we really spent a lot of time on with the design committee in talking about that space in multiple, because we had different levels of design committees throughout the process, or not levels, but in different spaces of time.
Yeah.
Is you could fit 300 or maybe 300 plus, whatever that number was. The configurations that you see here factor in required spacing for someone to get through, and so I would venture to say that I'm suspecting that those tables and chairs weren't always set up in the same way that
That's
figured
fair.
in handicap access, etc. And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in that area, but I would say it's fair to say that it's considerably less, but just a different dynamic configuration.
Sure.
This allows for outdoor seating, which isn't shown in this area, where those doors can open up and we can use the patio and outdoor spaces, but it is less.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you. On that topic, I see that there's more overflow space than in the village hall. Is there a capacity? Have the fire marshal identify max capacity could be how many?
Yes, so that the room has different capacities for depending upon the function. I couldn't recite those. If Mark was here, he could probably. I can get those to the council. But so the room can seat 198 if you use a different chair and table configuration. There's a different capacity if you take the tables out and just place chairs. There's another capacity if you don't have any tables and chairs. We'll have that within our policy when we adopt it for this room, but can also connect with Mark and make sure that's communicated to the council on what those are.
Thank you.
We bonded $4.95 million for City Hall that we were told we could put 198 people in. And this proposal takes away 1/4 of the seating capacity. I'm not happy with it.
Well, we can switch to the other table and chair configuration if the council.
I'm just one vote. I know that.
Sorry for interrupting, but that was when we communicated that, when we were building that was the thought process behind the capacity was, or the configuration was tables and chairs with, that was more of a cafeteria style setting. So this is a judgment call that the furniture committee made. So I don't want to put Councilmember Henry or the council in a position where you feel like if you're not happy with it, you want the capacity. This is a judgment call based on, do we think people are going to be happy sitting in chairs without backs? We feel like they won't be. And for the amount of money that you're spending on this, it's not something that we can return once people complain that they don't have backs. And so, I really want to head that comment on straight on. And so if you want the capacity over the kind of what we're assuming are going to be comfort needs, then
We haven't done a walkthrough on the building yet either. Is there any way we can just, according to the wall there, just take out one of the bathrooms, move the wall over another 8 feet, and we can put another, 50 people in the building?
is there any way we can do that?
Yeah.
Yes, for considerable costs. How would you take a bathroom out?
What's that?
It's the council's prerogative. I'm not sure you want to get into redesigning the space right now. Your call.
I'm concerned that we were sold we could have a big enough area to support that many people comfortably. Not sandwiched in, no. It was, maybe I was making an assumption that I shouldn't have, but the tables and chairs that were set up in the old hall, they had backs, correct? They were the old.
Yep.
Now that we're looking at modernizing, I understand. Bigger chairs, bigger tables. Is there any configuration, any tables out there where we can add to the capacity instead of 144 people? I was shocked by that.
So yes, you can do that with the tables without chair backs.
So there's two options of tables. Is that what I'm being told?
The only way that you can get 198 is with a cafeteria style table with no chair backs. There are other styles of tables with chairs. If you do a round table, that's gonna present a different configuration. This is the most that you can get with this type of table and chair setup. This is 100% the council's choice. We're presenting this to you as an option. So if you don't like it, you can. We're happy to go back and say we want a different configuration.
I'd like to learn more about the overflow spaces, what's in the other adjacent on both sides. So would food be served?
So
What's on the right?
The space to your right is the kitchen. So that's not they're served from that counter. The space to the left is a lobby space. So they'll be, that's where they'll line up. So in the old space, they were standing on steps lining up to get in. So this space, there'll be bathrooms to.
Is it a single door?
Double
like
doors.
A double door? Could the lobby be used for social engagements or, could it be used as part of it?
You wouldn't want to set up. You could set up tables out there. I don't think you traditionally want to. I'd have to check in with Mark on code requirements. I don't think that's something that.
Or high top tables?
Yeah, we have. That's where we have those benches. But if you start setting up tables in there, you're going to be blocking access to get into the space.
So,
you're at this point in the construction with the space there. It's going to be very difficult. We need by code to have the bathrooms. Again, but it's 100% the council's prerogative. If you want to see a different table and chair configuration, I'm more than happy to do that.
It would be nice if it seated more, but I would not support the cafeteria style table and chair where it's all combined. There's no back. I've sat in several of them at school functions.
So, if I may, I'm fine with this. I think, I think that these chairs and tables go along with this new city hall. I think if we were to invite people into our new community space and tell them that they're going to have to sit on cafeteria-style tables with seats that are this big, I don't think that fits the needs of all the members of our community. I'm thinking of toddlers who wiggle off and out of chairs very easily. I'm thinking of the elderly who have accessibility, or those who have accessibility issues of any age. Yeah. I think that these chairs are the way to go. This will serve as a community meeting space, potentially as overflow for city council meetings if we're dealing with a really hot topic. And I think that it will be sufficient to meet the needs of our community. I think for larger events, I think probably every single one of us sitting up here queued up on the stairs going into the old village hall. So we understand what it's like to wait at some of the larger community events. And I think everybody will do that. I think understanding that the option is between 50 more people and uncomfortable, potentially, depending on your situation, inaccessible seating that looks like an elementary school's lunchroom, and classier, more professional, what you would expect to see in a building of this stature, I am fine with moving ahead with these furniture choice selections. I also, kudos to the furniture committee. I think it's cool that you guys were all able to kind of pick based on your jobs, and Aaron's got a lot of space to lay out plans. Mark's got kind of a podium type equipment in his office to look at plans. Brent's got a little kind of bump out in his desk where you can pull up a chair and kind of talk through things when you're in there with him one-on-one. I think this is really well done. The one question that I had, and it might not be furniture related, but is there going to be carpeting downstairs in the community space?
No, it's hard surface.
Perfect. Okay. That was my question. Anyone else?
I would be curious to hear back from Mark if by code in the entryway on the left, if that could be used for seating also.
Sure.
Because you can put an extra 36 people over there, which is not another 50, but it's 36 more that can sit there.
Yep.
Because, I mean, we've been to the pork chops, all the breakfasts and everything that go on there. I've been in there when it's been full. And there was more seating in there. I just don't want people to have a lot of shock that there's, we spent 4.95 and we have less seating than we did before.
I think that's a fair point. I think that's the reality of the situation. This is whether it's the 198 or the 148, this is not the same space as the old building. And so there'll be some work that we need to do as a staff to let people know that, and hopefully it's been communicated in part. I also want to point out that that middle bench that's going left to right, it's not shown on this plan, but there's a wall there. So that's that's where the monitor is. So what you see on the downside of that bench that goes that's on its horizontal, that's just a hallway behind it to the bathroom. So it's basically a privacy wall, going into the entries of the bathroom. So the available space is what you see from the bench going up on the plan set.
Realistically, won't take another 2 sets of tables, is what you're saying.
Right.
I think
The one thing that was contemplated with the design of some of and granted, it's not always going to be feasible based on the weather, but the concept behind the patio piece was to, be in positions where for some events, Broadway was going to be closed and they were going to have those patio doors open, and CD was going to be placed out on Broadway, bringing the inside to the outdoor space. So that was the context of thinking about this space, that no matter what you were going to do on this lower level, you're going to be confined by space. But the committees that worked on it wanted to bring outdoor spaces as a part of the indoor space and vice versa. And so this plan is a representation of that. But you're not going to be able to fit 300 plus people to do a bingo down there. It'd be 150. And so
We understand that.
that's the new reality. And so if there are expectations that the council wants to set or direction you want to give the staff, it'd be helpful to have that now, and have these purchases be in line with what your expectations are. So if you don't want to see the 148, if you don't want to see the configuration, this project has been a really great project as far as consensus building and give and take. And so I don't want to see us get tripped up on furniture, right? It's a conversation to have, but I don't want it to be abrupt. If you want to see some changes, this is just what we're proposing to you. I don't want it to be perceived as a bait and switch. If you want the 198, you can get the 198.
I have a couple questions. And I don't see a need for any changes, but just more like clarifying questions. And I think of this as buffet style setup. So are we ordering extra chairs for if you wanted to have it be for a meeting accommodation, so the chairs would match?
So right now, we don't have in the plan to order extra chairs, so.
Okay. And
One of the, because there's some context to that. One of the pieces that the design committee or the building committee looked at was initially they had a space for table and chair storage. So this plan doesn't have any table and chair storage because you didn't want to waste the footprint on storing tables and chairs. And so you'll notice in the plan these chairs or these tables have wheels and the chairs are stackable, but you couldn't take, I mean, unless we stored them off-site or could, shoehorn them into an area, it's not designed to move everything out, and there'll be some challenges to that. But the reward is you're not taking away space to store tables and chairs. You're maximizing the space of your community space. There's probably some areas that we could store some additional chairs, and frankly, that's probably a good idea if we end up having something bust. I mean, there'll be a warranty on the purchase. I'm not sure what the length is on how long they'll last from like just a design perspective. But one of the warts, because every building will have warts, is there's not a ton of storage here. The site doesn't allow for it. The space needs don't allow for it. And so this is the biggest community space room that you could get on this site, if you just wanted to limit it to one floor. So this is the biggest that you could have gone. But there are some constraints. But to your question, we certainly could buy additional chairs. The cost will go up, but we certainly could do that.
then my other question is there any other part of the building that somebody could rent? So my thought is, if it was a family event and maybe there's a small arts and crafts, or there's a recital and they want, or it's a dance recital and they want like a dressing room, is there a conference room or anything on the second level that would just make this more of a multifunction then give them more space?
So the intention was so that you'll notice a little conference room on the upper left of the plan. That was the intent, is to not only rent out that space, but to use that space kind of as you described.
Okay.
One of the next pieces of this process will be for staff to develop a rental and use policy for this space, but as it stands now, there wasn't any intention of renting out the traditional city hall space on the upper level. That certainly the staff is going to take direction from the council, but that is how it would be suggested to be drafted. But we'll follow whatever prerogative the council has in that regard.
Those were my questions. Thank you.
The intent was for safety and security of the offices and everybody upstairs.
Plus, then you'd probably have to staff it if it was being rented at the time.
Well, even like on a Saturday, if somebody wanted to rent it out, it was just more about safety and security and for the city offices. Brenda, you're on the committee, right?
Yes, I was.
Were these the smallest chairs possible for the community space that were available?
I don't know the answer to that. I think from what I saw, they were all very standard in size by an inch, perhaps, difference from what I saw when I went on tour.
If I may, I would like to add that the fluid was really thoughtful in the spacing. That wasn't something that we necessarily thought about. So thinking about people waiting in line, making sure you weren't feeling super crowded with people directly behind you if the two chairs were pulled out. So I would say they had even a deeper understanding of the space than we did, just understanding the space that you need for the room to circulate properly if there's something like a food line. So that was helpful perspective too.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept a proposal from Fluid Interiors for $150,481.21 for office furniture for the City Hall project.
We have a motion by Councilmember Sayer
I'll second that.
and a second by Councilmember McKnight. Any further discussion?
No.
All-
I'd like to know if there's any way we can get other chairs, just because I think there should be more seating down there. I just do. But anyway, I'm just wondering.
Are you wanting to add chairs around the existing buffet tables, or you want more table space plus chairs?
Well, think about it. If the chairs were an inch, 2 inches smaller, you might be able to get at least 2 more chairs on per table. And now we're talking about another, 20 potential seats. It's the occupancy that 198 versus 144 is a big number for me, but it is what it is.
I hear your concerns and recognize them. I can't imagine that the chairs come in different sizes that would be significant enough to allow for this. And I think kind of what Aaron said, the spacing is thoughtful. I don't think that, I know that when I first looked at this, I didn't think of the line, because the service is going to be at the other end from the doors. So people are going to have to queue up to get in line to get their pork chops, their pancakes, their steaks. Also, if you remember the old City Hall, you'd have to ask for permission from the person sitting behind you when you wanted to get out. They were squashed in there so tight. And I think that this is a thoughtful and well laid out design.
I have a question. Would it be possible to put in the rental agreement that somebody could bring in additional table and chairs, so that if they wanted to maximize capacity, as long as they're, not violating fire code? And I really think that we're losing track of this, because right now we're really just talking about the office furniture, but,
No, we're talking about all the furniture.
okay, sorry.
So I think we can have Brent answer this. I
Yeah.
would imagine it has to do with fire code. I think too, I think we want to think about the use of this building, think of an apartment, and when you get renters bringing in furniture and banging around on the walls and whatever. So I would imagine that they did due diligence, and this is as many as we can fit in there. And we don't want to have another situation where you have to ask your neighbor behind you if you can scoot out your chair. Is it a fire code issue?
Adding more tables and chairs, depending upon how many they add and how many chairs, I think it's something we can address in the policy, but yes, you can do it. It's just, what level of risk do you want, and do you want to encourage people to bring in tables and chairs? I think it breaks down to simply, do you want to table this and have the staff bring back a different design for tables and chairs, or do you want to approve it as it is? We can do it either way. We're not pulling for one or the other. We thought this would be the best way to meet the needs of the community based on what we heard. But you're responsible. You're representing this space. People, you answer to the community. So we want to do what meets your needs. So this was our attempt to do that. But if we didn't hit it dead center, send us back. If you like what you see, tell us to move forward. But there, absolutely no hard feelings if you say, hey, we want something different. But if you want it, then we'll move forward.
What type of time frame would you be able to bring back numbers or a different layout for the seating?
I would say we could, at the soonest, it would be your next meeting. At the latest, it would be your first meeting in May.
When are we planning to define the use for this rentable space?
That would be a Mark question, wouldn't it?
No, it's
My question is, it might be helpful for the council to review sort of our rental policy and what we envision will be in the space or what we want to restrict. Helpful in making a furniture decision. I don't know. So maybe we could time them together.
Yeah, the rental policy was planning for early this summer, right?
Oh, okay.
This is just my opinion. I don't see a connection to furniture as it relates to the rental policy. That's going to be pretty black and white as far as how it's done, what it costs. Are you going to allow alcohol or not? Because there's some pressure to get, not now, but eventually there'll be some pressure to get this ordered so that when we move in
Agreed.
August,
Yeah,
it's ready to
that
go.
you have something.
So I don't see, I mean, there might be some loose connections. I don't, the way the policy that I'm envisioning that you're going to want and you're going to see it isn't going to be impacted by the number of tables and chairs
Okay.
you see in
All
there.
right. I was just, yeah, that's fine. I was just trying to throw out another idea to see if that would help us.
So yeah, my feedback is in response to Councilmember Henry's discussion on this, but otherwise there's still a motion on the table.
Correct. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes.
Okay, we need a roll call. Councilmember Henry,
Nay.
Councilmember Sayer,
Yay.
Councilmember McKnight,
Yay.
Mayor Johnson.
Yay. All right. Item 9.5, small cell wireless. Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight we are continuing a conversation that we started together on March 4th. So you saw this at a meeting just at discussion level. The information has since been also reviewed by the Planning Commission for a second time, and I'll get into some detail about that meeting. So there's been recent change in the Minnesota legislature to allow small cell technology throughout the right-of-way with limited restrictions. So a city is not able to prohibit this equipment from any district. The city of Carver does have a right-of-way permitting process and application fee. The change tonight, the proposed change, does not affect that at all. So we'll continue to have that same process, the same review for small cell wireless technology. So what the proposed change is tonight, it would be adding a conditional use requirement to districts including the residential as well as the central business district. So at the March 4th meeting, I used the historic downtown kind of interchangeably. That's not a technical zoning district in our city code, so the central business district and residential would cover the downtown. So that's the change that you see in their proposed change. So instead of saying historic district, it's not a zoning district, it's just something that we use. It's a residential and then the CBD. Like I said, the Planning Commission reviewed at their most recent meeting, which was March 21st. The public hearing was posted. No public comment was received at that meeting. I additionally have not received any formal comment from members of the public. The Planning Commission recommended the change on a 5-0 vote to you tonight. So the motion tonight would update the city code to include language that a conditional use permit is required in residential districts as well as a central business district related to small cell wireless technology. I'll open it up for questions.
Any questions?
The Planning Commission voted 5-0, so I think it's just following state guidelines and everything, and it's going to be a moving target anyway. So, yeah.
I'd agree.
Anybody else?
Nope.
Did we see this? We saw this in our last,
Yeah,
talk about this in the work
not
session?
the last
I'm
or the
confusing that with
previous.
the,
March
I was at the
21st.
last one, so it was,
okay. We've seen this recently.
Yep,
And also in the Planning
it was
Commission.
also a Planning Commission
Okay.
on the 21st.
Remember where
No,
I'm remembering seeing it from.
my only comment would be, thank you to City Planner Smith for presenting that March 21st, because since then I've realized how timely this is, just because some other cities that now have standards for the aesthetics to this type of thing. Northfield was one of them, Winthrop and Rochester, and I think it's really cool that we're right there with them. So I appreciate your work on this. Thank you, Smith.
All right.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 02-19, amending the city code related to small cell wireless.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion from Councilmember Henry and a second from Councilmember Sayer. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, Councilmember Communications.
I have no updates.
Okay,
Likewise, no updates at this time.
all right. I just want to remind everybody about the Jonathan Carver open house, which will take place before our next meeting, which is Thursday night, April 11th, from 6:30 until 8:30 up at Carver Elementary. And I also wanted to take a moment and send my thoughts out to the Ryan family. Tom Ryan is a member of the Carver Fire Department, and his wife Stacy passed away last week. So our thoughts go out to the Ryan family.
Thank you for that. I was going to do that. We had a planning commission meeting, and we went over small cell wireless. Other than that, not too much. That's all I got tonight.
All right. Brent?
Yeah, just a reminder, on Monday, April 8th, we're doing the council and commission training at Carver Place, 7 o'clock. Then for your next meeting, I talked to the mayor about this. What we'd like to do is put an item on the agenda related to the levy, essentially certified levy, or in essence, a resolution of support. So we've talked a lot about different functions of this levy, but as a council, you haven't really gone on the record saying, yes, we want to do this, we want to take steps to advocate, get special legislation, and so I just think it would be in good order for the council to consider that resolution. For instance, if you didn't have a majority of members that wanted to seek special legislation, it wouldn't be something that you'd want one council member to go off and start seeking legislation for a project. So in order to have some kind of a defined process, we're going to bring that to the council on the 15th. And that'll be kind of a kickoff to like, hey, we're going to do this. So it fits nicely with the mayor's letter to residents is going out in the newsletter. Then we'll do some social media and website postings on the councils could consider this resolution. It's obviously not binding to anything. You're not committing to making any payments or levying any tax dollars. But what does, I think it provides with kind of organizational support for people going out and advocating for the project if that's what you choose to adopt. So
I think that's an excellent idea because, I mean, certainly the advocacy shouldn't rest on your two shoulders. You know, I think if we're all behind this, we should all figure out how to help. And so I think that's a good kickoff.
Anything else? All right. Aaron?
A reminder, the HPC is holding an open house next Tuesday, the 9th. So it'll be before the regular meeting. Starts at 5:30. John Von Walter is going to give a presentation about Carver's history. Staff will be available if people that live within the historic district have questions about upcoming projects. We can talk through permits. And then we're also highlighting some properties that have won the HPC award in previous years. So Tuesday, April 9th, 5:30, Church by the River.
Dan?
Not next week.
Back row? Brian? Larry? Brenda? Anybody? All right.
Make motion adjourn.
I'll second that.
Motion by Councilmember Henry, a second by Councilmember Knight. All in favor? Say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.